If you want to be a great writer, then you better be a great liar. And if you are dating a writer or have a writer in your family or are friends with a writer, then you better be sure that they are lying to you. And here on Right Conscious, I talk about the best books and writers of all time. But I have countless videos on why many of those great authors were terrible people, were abusing people, manipulating them, and killing people, and so many other crazy things. And in our society, because many people are dumb, when they hear someone say that they have a psychology degree, they say, well, does that mean you can read my mind, or are you going to manipulate me? But they don't realize that people who get psychology degrees are cloned cognitive behavioral therapy spam bots who dismiss the real psychologists like Carl Jung because they have logic and drugs now to fix all of our problems. The real people you should be worried about are not people with psychology degrees, but who are writers. And if you don't believe me, that's okay, because we are about to hear from Italo Calvino, one of the best authors of the 20th century, the Italian boogeyman, the Italian fantastical writer who everybody should be reading right now. But let's now hear from Calvino on lying. Novelists tell that piece of truth hidden at the bottom of every lie. To a psychoanalyst, it is not so important whether you tell the truth or a lie, because lies are as interesting, eloquent, and revealing as any claimed truth. I feel suspicious about writers who claim to tell the whole truth about themselves, about life, or about the world. I'd prefer to stay with the truths I find in writers who present themselves as the most bold-faced liars. My goal in writing his book, If on a Winter's Night a Traveler, a novel entirely based on fantasy, was to find in this way a truth that I would have not been able to find otherwise. And there is a ton to unpack here with this Calvino quote. But his first assertion is that our job as fiction authors is to create a world of fantasy. It's to make things up, to snatch them from the creative ether or manipulate them from past experience and turn them into a story. And yesterday over on my Substack, I made a video on Hemingway, where he said that we have to make our fantasy stories truer than reality, truer than the true. And to become a master of that, you have to become a master of how people react to information and stories, because that's what good storytellers do. There is this whole movement of writers and of artists who aren't successful, who aren't good, who think that they can just write whatever they want and that the reader doesn't matter and that they can just do art for art's sake. But at the end of the day, all the great writers know that their job is to manipulate someone on the other end to be either entertained or transformed, or hopefully both, by their work. And to be able to do that, they have to know how that person is going to react. They don't just throw shit at the wall and hope it sticks. They're not these savants who can just write and it just works every single time. They had to first, in their personal life, be interested in psychology, be interested not just in stories, but how it makes you feel. And the best way to begin with that is obviously reading yourself. When many of us were young and before we became writers, or if you're just still a reader, we were consumed by books. I became obsessed with how books would make me feel, how they would make me want to stay up all night, and they would change my mind on things and make me into more of a nihilist or more of a true believer or whatever. It was amazing. It still is amazing. And it isn't a coincidence that to be a writer, you also have to want to spend a ton of time alone. And that when you look at many writers, like Cormac McCarthy, for instance, he spent most of his childhood alone under no supervision. He became a master of himself and the thoughts and the creative world within. Countless other authors are the same way. Yes, there are outliers. The same is probably true for you. And so long before we ever decided that we were going to have a writing routine and become disciplined and do any of these things, we started to work on the internal world, to live in that. But the problem with that is that as you start to build your internal world, you realize that that world does not correspond to consensual reality, that you cannot take this internal beautiful soul that you have to the public education system, or you are going to get bullied, or you're going to get bonked on the head, or you're not going to be able to connect with the boys or the girls. And if you outright reject that, and let's say that you do that, then you become the weird kid in the corner. And when you become the weird kid in the corner who nobody really appreciates or likes, you lose access to reality. One of the most potent things for a writer to be able to tap into. You lose access to the human experience because, yes, kids today, I'm a teacher. They like to play Clash Royale and shove Red Dye 40 down their throats. And they didn't do that 30 years ago. But we still are humans. And you can't learn about humans from inside your house, especially with fiction. There are exceptions like a Emily Dickinson who could write the internal world really well. But even people like Kafka who, were very inward, still were out in the world and working and doing physical activities and yada, yada, yada. And so what ends up happening, and here we go back to lying, why writers have to become great liars and why it actually helps them, is that we build this creative, beautiful soul that doesn't correspond with the world. And then when we confront the world, if we want to be a part of it, we have to change that. We have to change who we are to fit in. Okay, so then we do that. But there's an itch still in our soul. I remember doing that, like hopefully all of us did. But while my 7th grade classmates were talking about RuneScape or this girl's so hot or whatever, I would be like, I would try to pry into them and make stuff up, do anything to get a reaction and something real out of them. Because I felt like I was going insane just having to listen to the monotonous stuff over and over again. And what I realized now in retrospect that I was doing was that I was training myself through lying to be a better writer, to be a better thinker, to understand how people react and can become manipulated and be taken to the highs and lows through words, through stories. And like I said, you may be like, Ian, I don't resonate with this. Well, that's maybe why you're not on the bookshelf behind me. Because like I said, if I go down the playlist of the people who I talk about on this channel, and obviously there are outliers who are great people, awesome, whatever. Most of them were pieces of crap, especially in the earlier life. They were manipulating people. Cormac McCarthy was dating 15-year-olds and, taking them off the streets and shipping them to Mexico. David Foster Wallace was womanizing his students and anyone he could get a hold of. And let's be honest, the best fiction writers are people who are very talented most of the time, very smart, just born with the gift, but also have a very screwed up soul. And what do people with screwed up souls that are very talented do before they hopefully later on in life have a conscious awakening? They manipulate people. And when I read their work, I see that on there and I see them manipulating me, because what we are doing, what is asked of a reader, is such a high bar. This novel, Carlos Fuentes' The Death of Artemio Cruz, great novel. But to read this is going to require 4 hours of mental effort. You're going to have to transform yourself. You're going to have to be emotionally available to absorb this and understand it and really get something out of it. But if I show someone a YouTube short, a poem, a song, they don't have to be. They could passively listen to it and get the gist of it. We are asking people to be active, and language, whether it is written or spoken, has a very powerful effect in terms of manipulating people. Look at what politicians do. But with a novel, we have someone who is alone, who is opened up, who gets to actually feel what we are doing to them with no repercussions. Because if you open yourselves up to politicians or whatever, then you are sucked into that world. But if you open yourself up to Carlos Fuentes, no one's going to care. No one's even going to know. And so one of the big missions that I'm pushing here on Write Conscious is for us to be able to write consciously and to wake people up. We have to realize that it is a practice, that it's possible, that we've been programmed to think that all art just comes from the ether and it just comes out of you, and that you need to go with it and not worry about its impact on the world or the reader, because you can't control that. We have this Lynchian mindset, which most of the time comes from people not involved in novel writing, that tells us that we can't consciously manipulate art and the audience to get a certain result. But in most cases, especially people who in writing say this, they just don't want to give away the secret sauce. They don't want to have to talk about what they actually do to produce something very good. And what does it mean to be a modern writer? What is the next step? It is a practice of both polarities. First, we have to step into what we've already become. We are more self-conscious than ever. We are more depressed than ever. We put on more masks and more personas than ever. And that sucks, but it is our reality, and we are now masters of it. We've all posted on Instagram. We've all tried to appear a certain way. We've all failed and succeeded, hopefully, in those regards. That is the dojo. That is something that writers like, any of the modernists didn't necessarily have to deal with. They got training in a different regard. They got training in the old world, in a connection with nature. And I wish we were still there, but we're not. So we have this reality where we manipulate ourselves and judge ourselves. And then we learn to manipulate others to view ourselves in a certain way. That's a gift for writers. And now we have access to all information ever created. If you go to shadow libraries, you have access to tens of millions of books and manuals. You have access right now to people online who will read your stuff for free and critique it. You have access to all of it and the gift of persona and manipulation. And you don't want to use it? You want to sit here, it's all just coming. Use it. Consciously manipulate me in whatever way you see fit as an artist. Even better, consciously uplift us and transform us with your literature to make us better. With every polarity, with us having a mask and kids committing suicide and everyone going down because of social media, what's on the other side? Honestly, if you believe in polarity, then what's on the other side of that contrast? The other side is taking that ability and using it to create light in the world. Because there are plenty of people taking that same ability and creating dark in the world. Us novelists have the ability with over 100,000 words, with making someone commit 5 hours of the time, and we can help them get inside other characters' heads, thus their own head, more ability to make people step towards something better than anybody else, more than any personal development guru or pastor or anybody. I've had my life transformed by fiction novels in such weird ways, as I'm sure you have. So if you are living a quiet life, if you are living on the back burner and not dealing with that persona, even though you think that's a taboo and you're not supposed to do that, and we're just getting drilled, be authentic, be authentic. Anyone who says be authentic is inauthentic. There is no such thing as authenticity. Connect to a transcendent anchor, whatever that is. Open your Wi-Fi signal to the creative ether. Learn your inner world, learn the outer world, and let's make some art, everybody. Let's make it happen. Are you ready to go? There are no rules. Someone the other day said, "This is all semantics, right, Conscious? You never actually prescribe what to do." I'm prescribing you to make a Substack account right now and create some conscious art that's going to help people. I don't know how you're going to do that. I have tactics. I talk about sentence structure, but at the end of the day, it's up to you. Are you a doer or are you a non-doer? Are you going to grill and chill, or are you going to fill and build a new reality? I don't care who you are, what you're doing. Stand up, everybody. We're standing up right now. I will see you guys later. Join the literary renaissance. We are on Substack.com, where it is happening right now. I don't think I can detach this mic. I would love to see you guys over there. I will see you soon. Let's go.